The winter wind cut across the Norfolk countryside like a blade, whistling through the bare branches of the ancient oaks that lined the long private drive leading to Ray Mill House. It was just past 5:30 in the morning, and the estate of Queen Camilla remained shrouded in a pre-dawn darkness that seemed to swallow the sprawling Georgian mansion whole. Inside the main house, all was quiet. The queen consort was still asleep, unaware that beyond the high brick walls of her private sanctuary, a silent convoy of unmarked vehicles had killed their engines and were amassing at the main gate. This was not a drill. This was the execution of a warrant that had sent shockwaves through the highest echelons of the British establishment. For weeks, a clandestine investigation had been brewing, the one that threatened to expose a secret as old as the monarchy itself. It began with a glitch. A minor clerical error in the Royal Collection Trust's digital archives had revealed a discrepancy. Several items from the personal jewelry collection of the late Queen Elizabeth II, items that should have been meticulously catalogued and stored within the secured vaults of Windsor Castle or Buckingham Palace, were simply not where they were supposed to be. Initially, it was thought to be a paperwork mistake, but as a quiet audit was expanded, the truth became far more sinister. The trail of missing treasures, a breathtaking sapphire and diamond pendant once owned by Queen Victoria, a pair of historic Art Deco earrings, and a uniquely rare Fabergé flower study, all seemed to lead to one place: Ray Mill House, the private Wiltshire retreat of Queen Camilla. Leading the operation on the ground was a man who had dedicated his entire adult life to the service of the Crown. Warrant Officer Class 1 Alistair Finch of the Coldstream Guards was not a man easily impressed by titles or royal glamour. He was a soldier, a man who had served in conflict zones with a quiet, unshakable bravery. For the last 7 years, he had been assigned to the royal household, a position that placed him in the quiet corridors of power but demanded absolute discretion. He had seen countless members of the royal family come and go, but he had always reserved his deepest respect for one person only, the late Queen. To him, Elizabeth II was not just a monarch. She was the embodiment of duty, the very soul of the nation he had sworn to protect. The idea that her legacy, in her personal treasures, might have been appropriated felt like a personal violation. With him were 6 officers from the Met's Specialist Crime Command, their breaths forming thick clouds in the frigid air as they awaited the signal. The lead detective, a sharp woman named Inspector Dillon, checked her watch. They had the legal authority, the warrant signed under the Theft Act, but they also had strict instructions from the highest office in the land, the Prince of Wales. Prince William had been briefed on the findings of the audit. The information had been explosive, painting a picture of a quiet, methodical transfer of assets from the Windsor vaults to Camilla's private residences. While not technically stolen in the common sense, there were no smashed windows or locked doors, the implication was clear. Items that were part of the sovereign's personal property, intended to be passed down through the generations as symbols of continuity, were being moved into the private, inheritable possession of the queen consort. It was a breach of trust so profound that William had given the operation his tacit, if not official, approval. He needed to know the truth, and he needed the treasures returned to the custody of the crown. "Let's go," Inspector Dillon whispered into her radio. The heavy iron gates of Ray Mill House slid open, courtesy of a court order requiring the estate's security team to stand down. The convoy of dark SUVs swept up the gravel drive, their headlights cutting through the darkness, finally illuminating the grand facade of the mansion. Inside, the silence was shattered by the persistent buzzing of the security intercom. A groggy, disoriented footman finally answered, his face paling as the authority on the other end of the line identified themselves. Within minutes, The grand entrance hall of Ray Mill House was flooded with officers and the sharp, authoritative presence of Warrant Officer Finch. The house was a museum of comfort and taste. Oil paintings by minor masters lined the walls. First editions sat on polished mahogany shelves, but Finch's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned past the obvious decor. He was looking for something specific, the hidden spaces. The investigation had suggested the existence of a private gallery or a secure storage room within the estate, a place where Camilla kept her most prized and private possessions. They started in the drawing room. Officers politely but firmly began their search, opening cabinets, examining drawers, their gloved hands carefully lifting objects. Inspector Dillon stood in the center of the room, her phone to her ear, coordinating with the team searching the outbuildings. And then they heard it. The sharp, furious clatter of heels on the marble floor of the staircase. Queen Camilla descended, her face a mask of cold, barely contained fury. She was wrapped in a silk dressing gown, her hair slightly disheveled, but her eyes were blazing with regal authority. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "Do you have any idea who I am? This is a private residence, not a public thoroughfare. I demand to know by what authority you dare to invade my home." Inspector Dillon stepped forward, her expression neutral but firm. "Ma'am, we are executing a lawful search warrant granted by the courts. We have reason to believe that items belonging to the Crown Estate and the personal property of the late Queen Elizabeth II are being held on these premises." Camilla's face, for a fraction of a second, registered something that wasn't anger. It was a flicker of concern, but she quickly masked it. "This is absurd. Everything in this house has been acquired legitimately or gifted. You are making a terrible mistake. I will be speaking to the king about this. You will all be dismissed." While Camilla confronted Dillon, Warrant Officer Finch slipped away from the main confrontation. He moved through a side corridor, his instincts guiding him. He remembered the architectural plans they had reviewed. There was a discrepancy between the listed floor plan and the actual footprint of the house. There had to be a room unaccounted for. He found it behind a seemingly innocuous bookshelf in a small wood-paneled study. There was no handle, no keyhole. But his trained eye caught the faint scuff marks on the floor, a slight groove indicating the shelf was moved regularly. He ran his fingers along the edge of the books, feeling for a mechanism. His hand brushed against a small, leather-bound volume of Shakespeare's sonnets. It didn't budge like the others. He pressed. With a soft, hydraulic hiss, the bookshelf swung inward, revealing a short, brightly lit corridor that led to a steel-reinforced door. This was it. This was the hidden gallery. Finch called for Dillon on his radio, his voice low and urgent. "Inspector, you need to see this." Downstairs, Camilla was still arguing when Dillon's radio crackled. She listened, her eyes never leaving the Queen Consort's face. "Thank you, Warrant Officer. Secure the area. We're on our way." She turned to Camilla. "Ma'am, we have located a sealed room in the East Wing. We will need you to provide the access code or the key." For the first time, Camilla's composure cracked. "That room contains private family papers, personal correspondence. It has nothing to do with your investigation. It is off limits." "I'm afraid, ma'am, that the warrant covers the entire property. If you do not provide access, we will be forced to gain entry by other means," Dillon stated, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. Realizing she was beaten, Camilla stood frozen, her face a thundercloud of rage and something else, fear. She gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod to her private secretary, who had appeared, ashen-faced, in the hallway. He stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he punched a code into a small keypad hidden within the paneling. The steel door clicked open. Warrant Officer Finch was the first to step inside. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The room was a temperature-controlled, perfectly lit private museum. It wasn't just a few missing items. It was a hoard. Display cases lined the walls, containing treasures he had only ever seen in history books or locked deep within the royal collection. There, on a velvet stand, sat the sapphire pendant. Its deep blue stone, the size of a pigeon's egg, seemed to glow with an inner light under the spotlights. Next to it was the Fabergé flower, its delicate enamel petals looking as fresh as the day they were crafted for a czarina. He saw diamond bracelets, pearl necklaces, and a small leather-bound journal. He recognized it from photographs. It was the private diary Queen Elizabeth II had kept during her coronation year, a historical artifact of immeasurable value. But it was the tiara that truly stopped him. Tucked away in a corner, seemingly as an afterthought, was the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara. This was the tiara Camilla herself had worn just months earlier to the diplomatic reception, the one she had used to signal support to Princess Eugenie. The public believed it was borrowed from the Queen's collection. And here it was, hidden away in her private mansion, far from the Windsor vaults where it was supposed to be securely stored. The audacity of it was staggering, and Finch felt a cold anger settle in his bones. This wasn't about greed for money, not entirely. This was about legacy. It was about quietly, systematically dismantling the history of the late Queen and absorbing it into her own private narrative. These weren't just jewels, they were symbols. The sapphire pendant had been worn by the Queen Mother during the Blitz, a symbol of defiance. The journal was the intimate thoughts of a young woman suddenly thrust onto the world stage. They belonged to the nation, to history. They did not belong in a secret room in Wiltshire. "Catalog everything," Inspector Dillon ordered quietly, her voice filled with a grim satisfaction. "Photograph every item in situ. We'll need a full inventory." The search team moved in, their cameras flashing, their gloved hands carefully logging each piece. It was painstaking work. As the winter sun finally began to rise, casting a weak, pale light over the Raymill estate, the magnitude of the discovery became clear. This was not a minor case of misplaced items. It was the recovery of a lost chapter of British history. The Royal Sentinel had raided the mansion, and they had found exactly what they were looking for: the late Queen's lost treasures, hidden away in the dark.